What's sitting on that shelf was, a few months ago, a living being with a heartbeat. And what happened in between is something no packaging will ever tell you. Before you assume this is another anti-meat lecture, it's not. We love meat. A good steak, crispy chicken wings, a Sunday roast, that's not what this is about. But there are a few uncomfortable truths that almost nobody knows. And to understand them, we need to start from the very beginning, where it all began. About 2 million years ago, our ancestors were basically vegetarian, not because meat wasn't tasty, but because it simply wasn't necessary. Then a shift in climate wiped out many of the plants they depended on to survive. Meat is what saved them from starvation. Once we mastered fire, meat became a permanent staple of the human diet, and it still is today. For 2 million years, that was a fair trade, an animal's life in exchange for our survival. But sometime in the last 100 years, that trade changed completely. Meat stopped being hunted or raised on a small farm. It became an industrial product, and with that industrialization came 5 dark truths that almost nobody talks about. What actually happens to the animals, what it does to your body, what it costs the planet, who really profits from it, and who pays the price for keeping your meat cheap. Why meat isn't the enemy. Before we go further, a quick note on why meat matters nutritionally in the first place. It's not a random food choice. It delivers every essential amino acid, plus iron, zinc, and vitamin B12, a nutrient that's almost impossible to find in plants, and these nutrients are often easier for your body to absorb from meat than from plant sources. The Inuit live almost entirely on meat and survive just fine in one of the harshest climates on Earth because they eat the whole animal, organs included. So meat itself isn't the enemy. The problem lies elsewhere, in what meat has become since we stopped hunting it and started mass producing it. The animals. Let's start with who this is really about. The animals themselves. A broiler chicken today is typically slaughtered between 28 and 42 days old. Left alone, chickens could live 8 to 10 years. That means a broiler chicken experiences less than 2% of its natural lifespan. Along the way, more than 20 birds often share a single square meter of floor space. It gets even darker. Male chicks from egg-laying breeds can't lay eggs and don't grow fast enough for meat production. Economically worthless, which is why millions of them are killed on their very first day of life. Pigs and cattle follow a similar pattern. Pigs raised for meat are typically slaughtered at 6 to 7 months old, even though they could naturally live up to 15 years. This isn't a case of a few bad actors, it's the basic principle the entire modern meat industry is built on: maximum output in minimum time. Your body. So what does all of this do to us when we eat it? Processed meat, bacon, ham, salami, sausages, hot dogs is cured, smoked, salted, or fermented. That process creates nitrates and nitrites, which can damage the DNA in your digestive tract. The World Health Organization reviewed more than 800 studies over 20 years and reached a clear conclusion. Processed meat is classified in the same cancer risk category as plutonium, asbestos, and cigarettes. Every extra 50 grams a day raises your colorectal cancer risk by about 18%. Important detail, that classification tells you whether something causes cancer, not how strongly compared to the other things in that same category. Unprocessed red meat isn't entirely off the hook either. 100 grams a day is linked to roughly a 17% higher risk of colorectal cancer. Large European long-term studies also show that eating unprocessed red meat daily is linked to about a 13% higher risk of premature death. For daily processed meat, that number rises to around 20%. There's another factor that goes beyond any single meal too. To prevent disease in crowded barns before it starts, conventional livestock farming routinely uses antibiotics, not to treat sick animals, but preventively on healthy ones. The more antibiotics in circulation, the more bacteria develop resistance to them. And that resistance doesn't stay in the barn, it spreads, including to humans. Antibiotic resistance is now considered one of the biggest problems in modern medicine. The planet. There's an even bigger bill here though, and it's not your body that pays it, it's the entire planet. Depending on how you calculate it, global livestock farming is responsible for somewhere between 12 and 14.5% of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. For comparison, that's roughly in the same range as the entire global transportation sector combined. Most of it doesn't come from car exhaust, it comes from something that might surprise you. Methane from the digestion of cattle and other ruminants, plus emissions from growing animal feed. Then there's land use. Enormous portions of the world's farmland aren't used to grow food for people. They're used to grow animal feed or serve as grazing land. That's one of the leading drivers of deforestation, especially in the Amazon. That doesn't mean every state is chopping down the rainforest, but it does mean the true cost of cheap meat isn't paid at the checkout counter. It's paid by ecosystems most of us will never see. Who really profits? Here's a truth that's probably the least well-known of all. The global meat industry is incredibly concentrated. Just 10 companies, headquartered in Brazil, the US, China, Japan, and the EU, control a massive share of the world market. In beef alone, 4 companies, JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and Marfrig, control 85% of the US market. In pork, JBS, Tyson, and Hormel together control 66%. In chicken, Tyson, JBS, and 2 other companies control more than half. What does that actually mean? These few companies have enough market power to push producer prices down, sometimes below what it actually costs smaller farmers to raise their animals. Meanwhile, JBS alone runs more than 100 different brands worldwide, many of which don't even show on the packaging that they belong to the same company. That creates the illusion of variety and choice at the grocery store, when in reality, a small handful of corporations are pulling the strings. Who pays the price? And finally, the people who keep this whole system running. In the US, more than 500,000 people work in meat processing. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. OSHA found in 2024 that meat and poultry workers suffer serious injuries at twice the rate of workers in other industries, and their rate of occupational illness is 6 times the national average. The main causes: extremely fast production lines, sharp tools, and repetitive motion, shift after shift. A large share of that work is done by immigrants. Human rights organizations estimate nearly a third of the workforce, many from Latin America. Especially when someone's immigration status is uncertain, they often have little power to push back against dangerous conditions out of fear of losing their job or worse. So the cheap meat in your fridge doesn't just come with a cost to animals and the environment, it comes with a human cost too, one that's historically been paid by the people with the least bargaining power in the entire supply chain. A fair caveat. Now, an important caveat, so this doesn't turn into a one-sided pile-on, many of the health studies on red meat are so-called case control studies. Researchers ask people who are already sick about their past eating habits, which can skew results. The climate numbers are debated too. Some earlier, more dramatic comparisons have since been corrected by scientists. And on labor conditions, it's fair to say the industry has made some safety improvements in recent years, even as human rights groups continue to document serious problems. In other words, not every single number in this video is set in stone, but the overall picture across animal welfare, health, the environment, corporate power, and labor conditions is backed by the overwhelming majority of research and reporting. Putting it in perspective, the World Cancer Research Fund recommends no more than 500 grams of red meat a week and avoiding processed meat almost entirely. US dietary guidelines also recommend keeping overall meat consumption moderate and relying more often on other protein sources. Actual consumption is far higher than that. The average American eats roughly 100 kilograms of meat a year, nearly 2 kilograms a week, well above the recommendations. Remember how we started? That piece of meat on the shelf, which a few months ago was a living being with a heartbeat? Now you know the 5 dark truths behind it. An animal that didn't even get to live 2% of its natural lifespan. Processed with substances that sit in the same cancer risk category as asbestos. Fed with feed that, somewhere in the world, cost a forest. Sold by one of 10 corporations that control the global market, and handled by people who, for a long time, have paid far too high a price for it. That doesn't mean you can never eat meat again, but it does mean the next package of meat on the shelf isn't just meat. It has a story nobody's told you until now. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. If you enjoyed this video and want to support us, subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps us a lot, because the next topic is going to be just as surprising.